Hey there. Normally we talk a lot of movies and stuff like that, and talk about the different genres that I like. But tonight I really want to talk about the genre that's closest to my heart, and that is the horror film. And often I've talked about in general and stuff like that, but I want to get a little bit more real with it. So when you're watching horror and you want to know which genre was the most, well, not which genre, but which decade was probably the most kick-ass and real when it came to horror, the most brutal, then it's definitely the 80s. The 80s was a time when VHS really came to the forefront, and horror was the thing. People watched tons of this stuff. People watched horror, they watched action. That's why there's so much Chuck Norris and there's so much blood and guts being spilled at the time. It definitely wasn't a PC time. The pussification of cinema would come the 1990s. The 1970s was about getting artsy and stuff like that, but let's face it, even their supposedly most brutal film, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, really was kind of low on the blood splatter, which wouldn't be the case in the 1980s. We're going to look at a few here that I think that deserves your attention if you haven't seen them. And if you have, you should really re-see them. And first up, just kind of as a primer to see like how things are going. Even the kind of like the kids or the comedy stuff was pretty kick-ass back in the 80s. And that's why we're going to look at two films by a director by the name of Fred Dekker. Fred Dekker did a few films, but probably none more popular than The Monster Squad, which is, think of it as a kick-ass version of The Goonies, which also came out in the 80s, where you got all the, basically, a bunch of kids taking on all the classic Universal monsters. And it's, well, this 2-disc set is a dream set for anybody that has it. You know exactly what I'm talking about. And this movie fucking rocks. If you were a teen when this movie came out, a young teen, this was pretty much balls to the walls action, horror done the right way. And hey, it's the guy that later becomes Zorro in the 1990s as Dracula, and he does a damn good job. Dracula, Frankenstein, we got the Wolfman here, and of course we have the kind of creature from Black Lagoon type of character. This is just one really damn good movie. And 87. But this isn't the only one that he would do. He would make one with one of the most iconic B-horror actors of all time, and it's Tom Atkins. And that's where the line "thrill me" would come from, and that's Night of the Creeps. Night of the Creeps was a fantastic freaking film. Part humor, part sci-fi, part horror, all badass cool stuff. I really, really enjoyed it. And I always loved the tagline for this movie. The good news is your dates are here. The bad news is they're dead. Unfortunately, that did not keep them from coming after you. Tom Atkins' character in the "thrill me" line would become synonymous over the years for B-movie horror. Love the ending to this movie. It really takes some chances. It's really ballsy, and just gets to show you that the 80s was the decade when it came to horror. This one here came out in 80 what? 86, a year before Monster Squad. It was a really good year, really good decade for Fred Dekker. Next up, if you want to talk brutal when it comes to horror films, and underrated in its brutality would be the original Silent Night, Deadly Night, a film that came out in 1984. How brutal is this film? Well, at the beginning of the movie, we get to see a guy, an escaped criminal in a Santa Claus outfit, kill a kid's his father in front of his eyes, and then rape and kill his mom before that kid later growing up to become a psychotic killer himself, and just doing some really cool stuff. If you're a fan of Linnea Quigley, which I am, she's got a small role in here, and horns. You just gotta see it. The sequel, of course, was mostly recycled bits from the first film, especially for the first 45 to 50 minutes of it. The sequel came out in about 86 or 87. And the bad acting and the garbage day sequence and the end of this film makes it worth watching and gives it a merit of its own. You could almost skip this one here and go straight to this one and get the gist of both of these films right in one. Next up is a movie that you're not going to appreciate until the second time you watch it, because the first time you're going to be going, what the fuck? And that movie is Slaughter High. Slaughter High has a twist at the end that you almost need to know to truly appreciate what this film is doing. You go through this entire film thinking it's just the stupidest fucking thing, and when you get to the end of it, and you're like, oh man, you can sit back and watch it again and appreciate it on a completely different level. Not many films can do that, but this one does it, and it does it magnificently. Slaughter High is a personal favorite of mine, and it's highly, highly underrated. You should definitely check it out. A great YouTuber and a good friend of mine, 4K Cinema HD, was on here and did a fantastic review of this movie that I cannot top. So, like I'm doing right now, I'm just touching on some of the stuff. And this is a classic. I gotta say, it's actually, I might leave this one out. Why, you say? Because he did such a good job of reviewing it that I had to look and see if I really want to get into it. Yeah, well, okay. But that being said, check out his review for this movie. And it's Pieces. Pieces is a Spanish horror film. It's supposedly set in Boston. Actually, it's Spain, pretending to be Boston. And basically, you got a little kid that's doing a jigsaw puzzle of a naked woman. He's got kind of a frigid, psychotic mom that comes in and kind of starts slapping him around like kind of crazy. The kid takes off and shows that he's even crazier than her because, well, he kills the mom. Though through, you kind of see that he manipulates the police officers into thinking that somebody else did it. So therefore, the kid gets away with it, and years later, hilarity ensues as he goes around killing and chopping up women and making his own human jigsaw puzzle out of them. There's one fantastic scene in this movie with a kung fu, and there's another fantastic scene in this movie where the killer decides to casually go into a fucking elevator with a chainsaw behind his back, and the victim doesn't notice this. Yeah, you gotta see it. Next up is one that I really dig. It had effects by Tom Savini because he didn't go on to do the Friday the 13th one that was being done at the time. He went with this one instead, and I think he made the right choice because this is a pretty kick-ass movie. As for fans of slashers, most people remember this one, and if they haven't seen it, they've heard about it. But I'm guessing now that Scream Factory has put it out, most everybody's seen this film, and that's The Burning. The Burning is just a fantastic horror film. Great one in the slasher subgenre. There's other films that I didn't get in here that I wanted to. My Bloody Valentine is another fantastic one that came in around this time, and a movie called Stage Fright. If you haven't seen that, not the new one that's out recently, but the original Stage Fright that was, can't remember the director right now, but I know that was it Michelle Save, Michelle Save, who of course worked on Tenebrae, and of course he was that silver dude in the movie Demons, which is another kick-ass 80s movie that I didn't take out, which everybody should see. But The Burning, great effects, wonderful looking kill in this one. Love the look of Cropsey. An underrated one that kind of just got caught in between the everything else, the plethora of horror movies that were coming out at the time, like Happy Birthday to Me and stuff like that. Was a movie called Terror Train, recently rediscovered by Scream Factory. This is one that I've been begging for a really good release for a long, long time, and it's one that I really highly recommend. It's got a really cool thing, and most of these horror movies, especially the slasher movies, you got a killer and he gets his mask, he wants to make it iconic, he wants to make it kind of his own thing, because you never know when you're going to get a sequel. Well, they went a different way with this one. Had the killer just switching up costumes, masks, and it's really cool. And it's one of these hidden plain sight type of things too, where if you guess the killer, props. Not who the killer is, because that's pretty obvious, but who the killer is on the train when the killer's not wearing the masks. Well, luckily my reaction time is good. Last but not least is the horror comedy extraordinaire, because the horror comedies were pretty big around this time. Think of things like Student Bodies, which really kicked ass as a kind of a slasher parody type thing. One of my favorites, actually, Melvin. Gotta love Melvin. But Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. At the time, you know, some people didn't get this movie. I was one of the people who didn't originally get everything with this movie. I love Bill Moseley's character in this film, but I really didn't understand what the hell they were doing right away. Same thing with the Evil Dead 2, which was another one where they basically decided, hey, we've done as much as we can with horror. Let's try some comedy bits on this one here, and they did it here, and it worked. It worked big time. It's a gore fest. It's comedy. It's just a freaking kick-ass movie, and this is an addition worth drooling over. Everybody should own this thing. If you are a horror fan at all, you need to own this movie. There are other fantastic movies that came out in the 80s that I didn't bother to take out, basically because it's 5 o'clock in the morning here and I'm just too damn lazy to get at some of my other stuff. But Demons 2, a lot of Argento's best stuff, just some really, really cool stuff. See, depending on what you like, the decade for you is going to change. But if you're a hardcore horror fan and you don't mind a bit of the blood and guts, a bit of nudity, and you like movies that kind of like take chances and do some different stuff like I do, well then the choice is really simple when it comes to your genre for horror. Whether your genre for other movies, to each his own. But for me, due to the fantastic volume and quality of that volume, and hey, let's face it, this is when Fangoria was at its best, when the other horror magazines were doing great, and it would inspire magazines to come out that wouldn't last, would actually come back later on. But unfortunately, some of those magazines came around at the wrong time because horror became popular and some of the stuff didn't. Well, by the time people catch on, sometimes the trend has already died down, and that happened with horror magazines that decided to make a case for it in the late 80s. When the 90s came about, they found themselves in a pretty bad situation. Magazines like Gore Zone, for instance, and Horror Fan. But that's for another time and another review. And let me know if you like this. This is a different type of thing that I'm trying to do with my channel. So defining genre for horror, it's the 80s. There's I could say it's opinion, but if you're a real hardcore horror fan, it goes beyond that. Thanks for watching, and for me right now, the kettle is boiled, my tea is steeping like crazy. It's going to be so freaking black I won't be able to drink it. So for me right now, it's time for tea.